Hey there, welcome to Ben's Eco Adventure and welcome to the Warren County Power Station in Front Royal, Virginia. I'm here today to talk about how you can charge your EV in the cleanest way possible. Let's get into it. The first thing I want everybody to know is that no matter how you're charging your EV is always going to be cleaner than a comparable gasoline vehicle. There is, of course, this persistent misinformation that just because power plants like this that run on a fossil fuel emit greenhouse gases, that somehow EVs are the same or worse, and that's just flatly not true. Across the United States today, power plants like this is a combined cycle natural gas power plant in a 3x1 configuration. The output's around 1,500 megawatts. Plants like this kind of represent the baseline for how electricity is generated in the United States today. It is the most common source. So if you're just plugging your EV in just randomly, not putting a lot of thought, didn't do anything special, your electricity is probably most likely coming from a plant like this. There are a few states that are still a little bit behind, that are still primarily relying on coal power. I'll put those at the bottom of the screen here. But know this, even in those states that are behind on the clean energy transition, an EV is still cleaner than a comparable gasoline car. The only thing it approaches is if you have a very efficient hybrid, an EV and that very efficient hybrid might be about the same just in those few states. However, even that is not entirely true, and that's what we're going to talk about more in this video. So if you are interested in making your EV a little bit cleaner, but you don't want to get too much into the weeds, the easiest thing you can do is to look for a green power plan. Now, in some states, you can actually shop which provider generates your electricity. So in that case, you're able to pick which provider generates the electricity that comes to your home. Now, of course, there's not a wire running directly from a power plant to your house, but it goes into the grid in approximately the same amount as you take out at your home. Now, that's only true in a few states that have a marketplace where you can choose which provider generates your electricity. In most states, though, your local utility is kind of it. Nevertheless, most utilities now have a program, some kind of green power program, where you can opt in to getting your energy from some sort of greener source, usually solar, sometimes wind, sometimes other things like biogas, or perhaps even hydroelectricity. Regardless of which of those renewable sources you choose, you're going to be doing better than the baseline power plant, which is already, again, as stated before, already way better than conventional gasoline. That being said, you already drive an EV, you have a clean power plan that's purchased, there's yet more you can get into the weeds. Now, I just want to say, for most people, this is probably more than they want to deal with, and that is totally fine. This is really information for the people who just want that little extra, do that little bit more, and also who have the ability to do so. If you're like me, you don't deplete the battery on your EV on a day-to-day basis. You might only need to charge every couple days, maybe even once a week. So in that case, that means the time you charge your vehicle is perhaps a little bit flexible. And that's where you can really go to the next level in terms of driving clean. If you're able to adjust when you're charging your vehicle, what you can do, and what I'll help you do here, is figure out when the grid in your area is the cleanest, when it has the most renewable energy, and when the energy is abundant, we'll say. So if you live in an area, and I'll put up a map here on the screen, if you live in one of the areas that's highlighted on this map, what you can do is go to a website of your local grid operator and look in near real time and see how that energy is being generated. And most of them have something like a pie chart where you can look around, you can see how much is natural gas, how much comes from nuclear, how much from wind, etc. So the important thing about this data is you can watch how that changes over time, because I think, as we all know, wind and solar happen when they happen. So that energy, it's not impossible to store it, and our grid is getting better about storing energy. But as of today, there isn't a whole lot of storage on the grid. So that solar or that wind energy is best utilized if it can be taken off at the exact time when it's generated. Now, you can get way in the weeds with this, but I'll kind of give you a relatively simple rule of thumb for this. If you live in an area, let's say like California, which has a lot of solar, but maybe not a ton of wind, the best time to charge your EV is almost universally early in the morning, but after the sun has come up. Across the US, more and more areas are getting large amounts of solar energy. In this area, this is all part of what's called PJM interconnection. And the transition towards renewable clean energy has been staggering in its speed thus far. In spite of all the headlines, in spite of everything you've heard, we went from a point of last year having about, a few thousand, maybe three-ish, four-ish thousand megawatts of solar, to right now, as I'm filming this in spring 2025, we have 12,000 megawatts of solar on the grid. Just in that short amount of time, it has exploded. So now, even in areas in the Mid-Atlantic and the Midwest, it may sometimes be advantageous, particularly in sunnier months, to charge your EV early in the morning to get the cleanest power possible. The other major source of renewable energy that varies throughout the day is wind power. And of course, it's very windy here today, so how apropos. But wind power is a little bit more difficult to ascertain than solar, because obviously we can all see when the sun is up, when the sky is clear, we know we're getting good solar production. This wind is really testing my tripod, so hopefully we stay upright today. With wind power, what I do, because there is a lot of wind power, particularly in the Midwest, is I downloaded the Windy app for my phone. And with the Windy app, you can actually set an alert when wind speeds exceed a certain amount in your area. Now, actually, you may not want to choose your particular area. What you want to do is find out where the nearest wind farms are to you. So like, let's say you live in Chicago. What you would want to do is set something like Pontiac, Illinois, where there's a bunch of wind farms in the area, and have it give you an alert when wind speeds exceed, let's say approximately 15 miles an hour. That's really the threshold where those turbines really start to crank out a lot of electricity. So the last thing I'll say is that if you live in an area that somehow the clean energy transition is still just really not happening with any kind of vigor, and there are still, unfortunately, a couple places around the country where that's true, the best thing you can do when charging your EV is just charge it overnight. All EVs, all modern EVs, have a way to set a timer where it will delay charging until, let's say, midnight, and it'll start charging at that time. If you can charge your EV, particularly in the hours between, let's say, 1 a.m. and about 4 a.m., demand on the grid is always going to be low during those hours, or at least the lowest throughout the rest of the day. So during that time, you are taking advantage of more nuclear power, and the power plants like the natural gas plant here and some coal plants are less efficient the lower their utilization. So if they're cranking out 80%, usually that's about their maximum efficiency. But if they have to ramp down to match supply and demand, and they're only putting out 40%, their efficiency goes down. So you're actually helping the grid in that sense. Even while you're still using fossil fuels, you're doing so more efficiently. Well, that about wraps up the video. If you have questions about how this all works, if there's something I said that wasn't clear, please leave me a comment. If you want to know maybe about your particular area and say, what's the cleanest in Wyoming or something, ask me. I may not be able to get back to everybody, but I will try to answer as many as I can. Regular reminder, if you're not already subscribed to Ben's Eco Adventure, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a like. It really does help out. Thanks for watching.